Welcome to the Night Ktichen. I'm your host, Josh Urban, and tonight we're talking about things that go bump in the night, some of the stuff that lives in the universe. If you haven't heard it already, be sure to check out last week's show on how to do astronomy too. This episode is brought to you in partnership with the Maryland State Library for the Blind and Print Disabled. Sit back and enjoy. Along the edge of the forest, a single porch light burns in the darkness. A hush has fallen over the land, except for the crickets and the lonely sound of a train in the distance. Still not sure if this is the house you are told about, you ring the bell. An energetic man bounds to the door and warmly invites you into the Night Ktichen.
Hey, come on in, the others are waiting.
The quirky group looks up and waves you to a chair at the rustic wood table. You sit down and the man begins. Hey there, crew. Anyone here like learning about animals?
Yeah.
Especially the weird ones?
Yeah.
You know, there's those fish that live deep in the ocean and have those little dangly lights on their heads.
Blub, blub, blub.
And then, of course, there's my Aunt Nancy, and you could do a whole show about her. But tonight, we're checking out some of the cool things in space.
Okay.
You're hip to planets,
Yep.
although those vary widely. And we've talked about stars, but what about whole cities of stars? Whoa. And where do stars come from in the first place?
Yeah.
And what happens when they explode?
Yeah.
And something out there is eating them. Wow, it's a crazy universe, man. Let's get into it.
All right.
Bundle up. It's cold outside, and I've got a telescope set up.
All right.
Let's see what we can find right from the backyard.
Ahoy.
Now, rising in the east, as if on a cosmic wind, is a little kite-shaped group of stars noticed since ancient times. They're called the Seven Sisters or the Pleiades. In Japanese, they're called Subaru, and the car gets its logo from this. This is one of my favorite things to observe with binoculars. The view looks like you took a handful of the most beautiful diamonds in the world and threw them across black velvet. Some are brighter and look bigger, and some look teeny tiny. There's even a line of stars that reminds me of a platinum chain. But what's all this? Well, this group of over 1,000 stars, loosely bound together by gravity, is a type of object called an open cluster. It's a boring name for such a beautiful sight, although it's accurate. Think of them as sibling stars, often being born from the same cloud of gas. More on that in a moment, and hanging out together. It's a big family party, but after several orbits around the galaxy, all the stars will end up wandering off in their own directions. Oh, did you hear that Susie moved to California? Oh yeah, and Carl went to Australia. Crikey!
Good day.
There's a lot of open clusters out in our galaxy too. The Pleiades are a medium distance away, 444 light years, although it would still take us 4.5 billion years to drive there on our 60 miles an hour space highway we talked about way back in episode 1.
Are we there yet?
Now, swinging the telescope to the south and up towards Pegasus the horse, we scan around a bit until, hey, what's that? It looks like a pile of sugar on a black tablecloth. Compared to the Pleiades' 1,000 or so young stars, this fella, called M15, this is after a dude named Charles Messier started a list of things that looked like comets but weren't, and this was the 15th entry on this list. It's a packed city of 100,000 ancient suns, 12 billion years old, and a lot farther away, over 33,000 light years distant. Man, it's called a globular cluster, and it's just that, a big old glob of stars. So it's older, tighter, and farther away than an open cluster. It's also a lot more stable, and they typically orbit the edge of the galaxy. If young, wild, open clusters are like a dance club, I like to think of globular clusters like a crowded bingo hall full of senior citizen stars, all 12 billion years old.
1-5.
And check out this sonification of another globular cluster. This photo has been converted to sound, so as the line sweeps across the photo, each little sparkle sound is a star, and we talked about this more in the last episode too. But check this one out, and big thanks to the guys over at System Sounds at System-Sounds for this awesome sonification. And at the heart of M15 lurks something truly strange. A black hole! I bet you've heard of these fellas, the cosmic vacuum cleaner, the thing from whence nothing comes back. Whoa! So what is it? Is it a big, strange space shark swimming around, gobbling things up?
Baby
Well, not
shark.
really, but you wouldn't want to get too close to one, you know. And here's Josh's explanation that sounds weird, but actually works. Okay, so if we picture space as the backyard, and let's say, for our example, it's kind of muddy and wet. A little story here. One day my dad, back in the day, ordered some firewood during the muddy season. And the heavy firewood truck sank its tires into the yard and got stuck. Oh, man. Took years for those lawn to be fixed. Well, let's imagine this firewood truck was 1,000,000 times heavier. So instead of getting stuck in the mud, the whole thing would sink right into the yard, making a hole 50 feet deep. Whoa, don't worry, the driver jumped out. Now, if we're in the front yard, no biggie. But if we went into the backyard and walked too close to the hole, we'd fall in and not be able to get out.
Help! Help!
This is sort of what happens with space. If you remember from our last episode, Albert Einstein figured out that space is kind of like a big piece of fabric,
I have an idea.
although in 3 dimensions, so it's hard to picture. In our example, the muddy backyard is space and heavy things make dents in it. The firewood truck would actually be a star, say a star that's so big that when it ran out of fuel, it collapsed in on itself in the form of a supernova and became so dense that it made a really deep dent in space. So the outer layers of the star blew up and the core just collapsed into this thing that eventually becomes the black hole. Wow. And if anything goes in there, it can't get out. And how things get out in space is to go fast. For example, you'd have to go about 26,000 miles an hour to get out of the dent that Earth makes in space. That's called escape velocity. And the more mass something has, the higher the escape velocity is. The sun, for example, you'd have to be going about 1.5 million miles an hour to get off the surface of the sun.
Where's my sunglasses?
A black hole makes a dent that the escape velocity is so high that it's even faster than the speed of light. So light itself is not going fast enough to get out. Man, wow. These black holes come in different classes too. Those having as much mass in them as a few suns to billions of times the mass of the sun. The supermassive black hole! The one at the center of the globular cluster M15 we're talking about is a rare intermediate type, having a mass about 4,000 times that of our own sun.
Not too big, not too small, just right.
So, if a star is near enough a black hole, it will get eaten. Nom, 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 nom.
Yummy.
There's even a supermassive black hole at the center of our own galaxy. Oh no! Are we doomed to circle a space drain, eventually crushed like a cosmic grape? Nope, don't worry. It's not out to get us. As a matter of fact, here's something weird. If the sun itself suddenly turned into a black hole, we would keep orbiting it as if nothing had happened and wouldn't fall in, although it would be awfully dark.
Hey,
Black
can't say
holes,
anything.
besides being fascinating already, give astrophysicists a headache.
Pass the
You see,
Advil.
this is the problem. Einstein figured out how to explain things that are big and heavy, like stars and planets. The branch of study called quantum mechanics explains things that are small and light, like electrons and other subatomic particles. But what about things that are small and heavy, like the middle of a black hole?
Right.
The current laws of physics go a little sideways, and they're working really hard at figuring out how things work in such extreme places. It's way cool stuff, man, and you should get involved.
Right on, right on.
So, a collapsing star can make a black hole. Whoa, hold up. People might want to grab a snack and a new cup of tea. This is the end of Part A. Part B is in the queue. Welcome back. Are you ready for Part B? Just backing up a few seconds to refresh ourselves of what we're talking about. Here we go. But what about things that are small and heavy, like the middle of a black hole?
Right.
The current laws of physics go a little sideways, and they're working really hard at figuring out how things work in such extreme places. It's way cool stuff, man, and you should get involved.
Right on, right on.
So, a collapsing star can make a black hole. But where did the star come from in the first place?
yeah.
Well, let's find out.
Okay.
When my mom was a little girl, she was hanging out with her friend, let's call her Jane.
Okay.
Hey, started singing. I see Orion in the sky and I ain't lying, ha ha ha. And they thought it was the funniest thing they ever heard. Then Jane lost her contact lens in the front yard and it remains missing to this day. However, around this time of year, I can honestly state that I observed the presence of Orion in the heavens, or how does it go? Oh yes, I see Orion in the sky and I ain't lying. He is a celestial hunter with his faithful dog at his side and a sword strapped to his famous belt. This is all outlined in the shape of the stars, and you kind of got to use your imagination a little bit. And there's a misty gem in this sword, something called the Orion Nebula. There's just the pictures of the stars in the sky, all the little braille dots there. Ooh. And the ancient Mayan people called it the cosmic fire of creation. And they were actually spot on.
Snazzy.
As we turn the telescope towards this peculiar sight, boom! Wow! Wow! It's amazing. Swirling clouds of hydrogen and oxygen gas glow in the night, energized by the young stars near the center. Wow! Shaped like a big seashell. The cloud is dotted with tiny glittering stars. These clouds are actually forming new stars. No way. It's a giant star factory or a stellar nursery. And it's called a nebula. Nebula is Latin for cloud, and nebulae being the plural, in case you were wondering. And our galaxy and many others have tons of these nebulae building new stars. There's a lot of dust floating around in space too, and sometimes we can see something blocking out the starlight behind it. We call this a dark nebula. The Orion Nebula is one of my favorite things to observe. So pretty it is.
Yeah.
If you'd like to feel it, check out the book called Touch the Stars by Noreen Grice. It's got a nice tactile graphic of the Orion Nebula, so you can feel it if you'd like. Cool. There are other types of nebula too. A planetary nebula is when a star slightly bigger than our sun starts to run out of fuel. The outer layers drift off like wrapping paper on a present, and the core of the star blazes up, energizing the gas that's moving away. And the whole thing glows brilliantly. And through a smaller telescope, it looks like the disk of a planet.
Hey, look at that.
Through a big scope like the Hubble or the James Webb Space Telescope that's going to launch soon, it looks like a giant alien eye or a bizarre drawing. And here's another picture converted to sound, or sonification, that I think you'll dig. It's of the Cat's Eye Nebula, and this time, the sound is going to sweep around like the hands on a clock. Listen to this.
And big thanks to the guys over at System Sounds at System-Sounds for this awesome sonification.
Sometimes, when a star goes kablooey, or supernova, technically speaking, there's star guts everywhere.
What?
And new stars, including our own sun, can form out of them. Wow. One such supernova remnant I like to look at is called the Veil Nebula, and it looks like shreds of thin cloth blowing across space. One last stop. We got to visit one more thing before we call it a night. The nearby, and that's a relative term, Andromeda Galaxy. Only 2.5 million light years away. The biggest member of the local group of galaxies.
Hey, neighbor.
Remember, a light year is almost 6 trillion miles, by the way.
Gee.
This one is another great view through binoculars. Wow. A soft football-shaped glow stretches across the view.
I see.
This haze is 1 trillion stars. They just look like a mist. But had I access to that new James Webb Space Telescope, I might be able to pick out individual stars. The amazing thing to think about is this neighboring galaxy has its own star clusters, nebulae, black holes, stars, planets, and who knows what else. Man, that is awesome. There's a lot of things still to learn about too. We got to check out pulsars, blazars, magnetars, and gravitational lenses for starters. And we'll have to talk about those another time soon, but there's a lot of cool stuff out there, man.
Well, sounds like it.
Now, as we start to pack up the telescope for the evening and head back inside, we might look up and see a glittering haze high overhead. Ooh. It's our own Milky Way galaxy. And I don't know about you, but it's so easy to get confused with terms like galaxy, solar system, universe. So think of it like this.
Okay.
We're here on Earth, right? This is sort of like us hanging out in our house. On the other planets like Jupiter and Saturn are the neighbors.
Howdy, neighbor.
Meaning the solar system is our neighborhood.
Okay.
Nearby things like the Pleiades open cluster we heard about earlier in the show
Over
are the
yonder.
next town over. And the whole Milky Way galaxy is our country.
Way over
The
yonder.
universe is the world, made up of at least 200 billion other countries, or galaxies in this case. And it could be a lot bigger.
Gee.
Are there other universes? That's called the multiverse theory. And they don't know yet. But it's sure exciting to think about, isn't it?
Yeah.
I hope you enjoyed hearing about some of the amazing things out there in deep space. Get excited about the wonder of it all, and of course,
Yeah, man.
if you have any questions or thoughts, please drop me a note at Josh Urban, that's JOSHURBAN, at protonmail.com.
Right on.
Now, a few quick shout-outs, and our calendar, of course.
Have you signed up for the NASA at My Library Reading Challenge starting December 1st? Well, you oughta. We're gearing up for the launch of NASA's James Webb Space Telescope, which will happen in December. Don't be left out. Sign up for the challenge on LBPD's Beanstack. That's Maryland, lbph.beanstack.org. Throughout the challenge, readers will have access to virtual NASA at My Library and NASA resources to gain new skills and explore educational and career pathways in Earth and space science. Check out additional space and astronomy resources posted on LBPD's website. Scroll on down and click on the Night Ktichen podcast. That's bit.ly/Night Ktichen podcast. And as always, please feel free to email me with any questions or comments or just to say hello anytime. That's Josh Urban at protonmail.com. JOSHURBAN at protonmail.com. Okay, folks, thanks again for listening. And one more thanks to the Maryland State Library for the blind and print disabled. I'd especially like to shout out LaShawn and Ashley for making it all possible. It's your universe to discover, so keep on thinking the big thoughts, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you, and good night.